Hamas video that was released on May 26, 2024 showed weapons that they took off of his body. And Israel claims that these are not weapons that they would give to the Israeli security forces. Okay? Which is why the speculation is either that he was a Palestinian, he was a member of the PA, like a part of the Palestinian security apparatus that seemingly was operating in the Gaza Strip alongside the Israeli forces. We're going to get back to Israel now, obviously, because we're obviously going to get back to Israel now because there's a fake ceasefire, as you know, that Israel is violating already. Israel has given the U.S. new intelligence, apparently. Let's see. Israel gave the U.S. new intelligence that shows Hamas has access to more bodies than it claims. We don't see Hamas making maximum effort regarding the bodies. We know they can do more, and we don't think anybody should give them any discounts, an Israeli official said. They're most likely still using fake intelligence, as they've done over and over again, in an effort to make it seem as though it's perfectly valid to cut aid into the Gaza Strip, which they have already done so. They've cut the aid in half. Okay? I don't believe Israel, even for a brief moment. Okay? I do not believe Israel at all. They are fighters and they are liars. And the UN is now calling on Israel to open the border crossings. Obviously, there's a couple different things that we're going to talk about here, but one of the things that has taken place in terms of the extraction of the slain captives and what the resistance groups have done so far is they said that this would take time, this initiative of finding where the bodies are and then removing the rubble and extracting those bodies, they said would be an endeavor that takes a lot of time. It's understandable. Israel destroyed Gaza. Okay? Israel destroyed Gaza. Obviously, it's going to take a while for people to find even their relatives, let alone the Israeli captives that were killed. Okay? And in the process, yesterday, Hamas delivered 8 bodies. Okay? In the second round, in 4 body batches. Okay? In the second round of 4 bodies that were delivered, okay, Israel claimed that one of the bodies that was released was actually not an IDF soldier. Palestinian resistance source told Al Jazeera Arabic that a body returned by Hamas that Israel claimed was not one of their captives, is actually an IDF soldier, was taken by Qassam fighters in an operation in Jabalia in May 2024. Qassam released a video of it at the time. The identity of this soldier was never publicly confirmed. There's been speculation that the captured soldier was a mercenary rather than an official IDF soldier, but Israel has never publicly acknowledged or identified him. So what's interesting about the second round of 4 was 3 of them were immediately confirmed as Israeli captives. The 4th one, on the other hand, was not. And Israel last night, while we were all sleeping, was going back and forth on whether or not the 4th captive was actually an Israeli citizen or not. Hamas said that the 4th captive who was killed was actually extracted in an operation in the month of May, in May 2024. Okay? Here it is. Al Jazeera source in resistance leadership operation to capture and drag soldier's body to one of the tunnels was carried out by a Qassam operation in Jabalia camp in May 2024. This obviously is a major blow to Israel's confidence. It's a major blow to the mighty security force that the IDF presents itself as. The very fact that amidst this that the Al-Qassam Brigade was still able to conduct military operations that struck a blow at the heart of the occupational forces while simultaneously extracting the body of one of the slain soldiers is a major ordeal. So in that process, Israel turned around and claimed that, as a matter of fact, the person that they had extracted in that operation in Jabalia camp in May 2024 was actually a Palestinian human shield. Israel does use Palestinians as human shields. Sometimes Palestinians that they've actually kidnapped in the West Bank, that they send over to the front lines in Gaza, and they actually give them some IDF fatigues. Okay? So there's a little bit of confusion on whether or not this was actually a mercenary, that was an armed combatant, that was extracted in this operation and brought into the tunnels, or if it was actually a Palestinian that was being used as a human shield. For those of you that are oblivious to this reality, that is right. A Palestinian human shield is normal process for Israel. Okay? This, weirdly enough, has actually forced Israel's hand into revealing that they use openly Palestinians as human shields. There's been plenty of Haaretz reporting on the matter, as you guys know. There's been plenty of Israeli reporting on the matter. It's called a mosquito protocol. That's what they call it, where they will take Palestinians, they'll apprehend and detain Palestinians in both the Gaza Strip and maybe sometimes even in the West Bank, and they will put them in front of their teams. They will like forcibly handcuff these Palestinian prisoners, Palestinian hostages, and will push them in front of their teams in order to draw out Hamas fighters or resistance fighters. Okay? Someone in Gaza that followed went back to find his father's body that he put in a shallow grave until he couldn't get back to him and it was safe. And then the IDF had exhumed the body. They're stealing bodies. So we still don't know. We still don't know exactly what happened as far as like whether or not this was a mercenary or whether or not this was a Palestinian. Okay. But that is the case currently. Okay. The identity of the soldier was never publicly confirmed. There's been speculation the captured soldier was a mercenary rather than an IDF soldier, but Israel's never publicly acknowledged or identified him. But what's interesting about this is, fourth body handed over by Hamas, said to be of West Bank Palestinian, used by IDF in Gaza as a human shield. Emmanuel Fabian and all of the Israeli media is openly recognizing the insane practice of using Palestinians as human shields now. Now, of course, the Hamas video that was released on May 26, 2024 showed weapons that they took off of his body. And Israel claims that these are not weapons that they would give to the Israeli security forces. Okay? Which is why the speculation is either that he was a Palestinian, he was a member of the PA, like a part of the Palestinian security apparatus that seemingly was operating in the Gaza Strip alongside the Israeli forces. But the very fact that he had Western gear on implies, because Palestinian collaborators like Yasser Abu Shabab, for example, do not get this level of gear from Israel. This seems to me like it was gear directly given to, this is Western gear, so it looks like it was gear directly given to especially considering that he was in the camp when he was apprehended and apprehended, his body was apprehended and brought into the tunnels. It seems more likely that he was a mercenary. The terror group had aired a video showing a bloodied person being dragged along the ground in a tunnel and published images of military gear and submachine guns, which are not commonly used in the Israeli military. Hamas later also published a picture of the man's face without naming him. Palestinian media at the time identified the man as Khalil Dawaz, a Palestinian from the West Bank's Aqabat Jabr camp near Jericho. The report said Dawaz had been detained by Israel in the past. The Public broadcaster reports, without citing any sources, that the man whose body returned operated alongside security forces in searches of underground tunnels. That was Hamas terrorists a year and a half ago. Now, the reason why I don't think this was a Palestinian human shield that they were using is because of the weapons that he had on him. Because Palestinians, under the mosquito protocol, are used as human shields by the Israeli occupational forces in the Gaza Strip all the time. Having said that, however, they do not get arms. They do not give armor to the Palestinians that are being used as human shields, and they do not give weapons to the Palestinians that are being used as human shields. The Palestinians that are being used as human shields oftentimes don't even have shoes, as a matter of fact. They literally will put them with their hands cuffed in front of the Israeli troop positions, okay? Because obviously if they were to give those guys weapons, they could just as easily turn around and start slaughtering the occupational forces, obviously. At most, the Palestinian human shield mosquito protocol is when they give them IDF fatigues. They don't even give them shoes usually, just IDF fatigues. Anyway, have you seen the thing about Motaz Aziza? Parasocial for me to say, but be careful about having guests at your home. Wait, what? I don't think that Motaz is like a collaborator or something like that. Okay. I think he has disagreements with, as a Palestinian born and raised in Gaza, he might have disagreements with Hamas from time to time, but I don't I'm not going to sit here and act like he is a collaborator or something like that. He's a fucking survivor of genocide. Okay? You're an American. Calm down. He survived a goddamn Holocaust that he documented every day, and his life was on the line when he was doing that. He lost so many of his friends. Everyone in the United States of America needs to fucking dial back a million times over. Okay? Jesus Christ. Palestinian here to say, unfortunately, there's a very different message in English than in Arabic where he blames the resistance. I listen. I know the drama. Okay? I know the fucking drama. I know. Americans need to fucking stay out of this conversation and understand that there are going to be differences in opinion amongst the Palestinian population. Not every single person that makes their criticism be known, even if it's not considered timely by many Palestinians I do talk to, for the record, that still doesn't change the reality that like a person is not a fucking Israel spy. Okay? Like this is different than like even Ihab Hasan or whatever. Like a lot of people that have disagreements with Hamas that still understand that Israel is the primary villain in this situation will oftentimes use any opportunity to disparage Hamas with a Palestinian position. There's different factions at play here. There's different ideologies at play here. Palestine, and Gaza in particular, is obviously a very diverse environment. Okay? Very diverse. There are plenty of people with different opinions there. No one is a monolith. Okay? No people are a monolith. And Palestinians certainly are not monolithic in their approach to governance under Hamas, for example. If that was the case, then Hamas's approval ratings would consistently be much higher in Gaza than it has been. Okay? You need to understand that. It's ridiculous. When you hear people criticizing the resistance in any shape or form, especially if they're Palestinians themselves, unless they're like Ahmed Fouad al-Khatib, who is a fucking Atlantic Council stooge, whose entire purpose is to collaborate with America and Israel and to present himself as a true Palestinian opinion that Westerners want to hear from. Is the reason why it's not an accident that he gets to talk to Jake Tapper, and no real Palestinian that escaped Gaza gets to talk to Jake Tapper. Okay, there is a difference between a person like that, whose primary role and responsibility is to undermine the resistance and defend Israel, versus someone who has disagreements with their own domestic affairs with respect to Hamas or any other faction in the resistance. Anyway, I understand your frustration, but what do you mean Americans should join the conversation? I thought the point was to engage. No, the conversation, you can join the conversation. I'm just saying that throwing around statements like someone is a fucking collaborator, especially when they have literally survived the Holocaust in the hands of Israel and had so many of their family members and their livelihood destroyed by Israel, so many of their friends and colleagues killed by Israel, is ridiculous. Anyway, calm down, everyone. Anyway, but that's neither here nor there. I'm not gonna entertain that shit. Walking buzzword generator. Yeah, I know. It must hit so hard to be this dumb. Like, just living your day-to-day existence being like, I'm not going to engage with the conversation here. I'm just going to say that you're generating buzzwords. Found out about the situation from my white boomer coworker from the comment. Looks like Hamas gave Israel a body that doesn't belong to them, to which I responded with another excuse Israel will use to continue breaking the ceasefire and continue the genocide, to which he said was not a genocide. What's more upsetting was having to stop the conversation since he sits directly next to me every day. Keep pressing him. You'll eventually get to him. There's always, Israel does so much fuck shit in American domestic affairs as well that it's obvious that you can get people to be frustrated with the way that Israel operates. Like, it's not that hard. Anyway, yeah, the public broadcaster reports without citing any source that the man whose body was returned operated alongside security forces in searches of underground tunnels and was killed by Hamas terrorists a year and a half ago. Amid the war, there's been a commonplace but officially prohibited practice of soldiers sending detained Palestinians to search buildings and tunnels before troops enter, endangering their lives. Interesting. The IDF says it strictly prohibits using civilians as shields and has opened investigations into several such cases. That's fucking the biggest bullshit of all time, by the way. They have it's called the mosquito protocol. They literally have a term for it. Get the fuck out of here. Oh yeah. Just like the Hannibal directive, right? Yeah, we're opening investigations into the most commonplace practice that the IDF uses. Yeah. They're weaponizing complementarity, by the way, when they do that. Complementarity is the principle that international courts of justice apply to Western and Western-aligned nations in an effort not to have to prosecute them. It means that if the government themselves are actually investigating war crime allegations, then it's not up to the fucking international courts to intervene and actually investigate them further. When a government, even one like Israel, refuses to do that sort of internal investigation, then the ICC says, well, or the ICJ says, it's our jurisdiction now because you're not doing it. This is called complementarity. The idea that if the government itself is prosecuting itself for war crimes, then there is no need for the international courts to intervene and prosecute for them. Except Israel uses that as a defense. That's the reason why Israel, for example, went in and prosecuted or tried to prosecute 6 of its rapist concentration camp guards, okay, in Sderot, which was the prison where famously 6, or even more than that, but 6 named Israeli concentration camp guards raped a bunch of Palestinian detainees to death on CCTV camera footage, okay? It was on camera. Sorry, not Sderot, sorry. Sidei Teiman. I apologize. Sderot is the fucking hilltops where the Israelis go and watch with binoculars the death and destruction that befalls Palestine in the Gaza Strip. Sorry. You're right. It's Sidei Teiman. And of course, the Israeli society went up in arms and literally successfully extracted these 6 concentration camp guards where they did the pro-rape riots. Yeah. Anyway, here it is. Body handed over by Hamas isn't hostage, the IDF says.
In Gaza this morning, food and medical aid is passing through the border. But as we mentioned, there's a problem with the 28 deceased bodies. These are hostages who died in captivity. Deborah Pata in East Jerusalem has more on that part of the story. Deborah, good morning.
Good morning, Tony. Well, Hamas is slowly releasing the bodies of hostages still in Gaza, a total of 7 so far, which has angered families waiting for their loved ones. The Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics says more than 11,000 people are still missing in the territory. And we spoke to hostage negotiator Gershom Baskin, who told us, sadly, some bodies may never be recovered. Somewhere in this landscape of ruin and loss are the bodies of the remaining hostages.
Many of the Hamas commanders who were responsible for burying these Israeli hostages are no longer alive. They were killed by the Israelis. There are thousands of Gazans who are unaccounted for, who are believed to be buried underneath the rubble of buildings that Israel bombed.
First responders are now searching for the dead. But it is not easy when over 90% of the buildings have been damaged or destroyed, and there are only the most rudimentary tools available. As Gaza starts to think of rebuilding, the US peace deal calls for an interim governing body headed by President Trump to run the territory that ultimately hands control over to Palestinian rule. But that body has yet to be established, and Hamas has stepped back into the vacuum, allegedly targeting Palestinians accused of collaborating with Israel. There are videos of Hamas executing Palestinians believed to be armed gangs. What's going on there?
Hamas is killing them because they can. Israel has empowered, with weapons and money, gangs of Palestinians who were involved in mostly illegal activities in the past, and they've empowered them as an alternative to Hamas.
President Trump.
It is wild that they're... No. He said it. Bro, come on. It's on CBS. This motherfucker straight up said... Come on, dude. He straight up said Israel has armed and offered aerial coverage, maybe not to that degree, but it is the truth. Israel has not only armed, but offered aerial support and allows gangs, criminal elements within Palestinian society to disrupt the aid delivery mechanism over and over again. Okay? And the people that are being executed by Hamas are members of those gangs. And it's not only now that they're admitting this. If you've been in here tuning in every single day, you have heard it. I've covered it extensively. Okay? I've covered this extensively. Israel has openly admitted that they've done this, for the record. Netanyahu has said he has done this, for the record. Why else do you think a person who dropped out of second grade, Yasser Abu Shabab, wrote a fucking Wall Street Journal opinion editorial? Yasser Abu Shabab is the leader of the fake popular forces. Okay? This was a gang of criminals and ISIS affiliates, drug traffickers and ISIS affiliates that were previously in prison. Israel broke them out of prison and armed them and allowed them to have a base of operations within the red zone in Rafah. Okay? A base of operations that was in Israeli-controlled territory within the Gaza Strip. And they were tasked with apprehending aid and stealing aid at the point of delivery. Okay? That's what they fucking did. And Israel protected them. Hamas would murk them every now and then amidst the genocide. Hamas would go in and at night institute like a curfew, and those guys were violating the curfew, so they would just like fucking straight up, engage them in gun battles and kill them, right? And there were many different operations that took place, except now that the territory, 50% of the territory has been given back to the Palestinians, Hamas is obviously restoring control. The entirety of the Palestinian resistance forces are playing a formative role in creating interior security. And a part of that is the truce and the clemency period that Hamas has given to all of the criminal components. Okay, their job right now is to restore order in the recovery process. They have already stated that every single Palestinian that operated within these gangs will get clemency as long as they have not harmed Palestinians. Okay? As long as they have not harmed Palestinians. Even if they are traitors who collaborated with Israel, got weapons from Israel, as long as they did not harm Palestinians, they will not actually be harmed. As long as they're not murderers, they will not be touched, and they will have clemency. Okay? If you are following closely, you have already seen this. That's what they said. Not only that, but there is also a tribal council in Gaza. There is an interior tribal council because there's a bunch of different clans in Gaza. There's a bunch of different tribes in Gaza. And there's a tribal council that has offered firm commitment to Hamas in the process of restoring order. Okay? They have come out, and I'm going to read you what their statement was initially, because Dropsite, in their brilliant reporting, literally went to the tribal council chiefs and asked them, like, do you think this is appropriate? Because, like, the executions that took place. Now, there are some groups like this one that Hasbara psychos like Eyal Yacobi and everyone in Israel are posting, making this seem as though this is like some sort of civil war. They're trying to like create a media narrative that there's a civil war going on or something like that. It's not. It's not happening. It's things that operate from Israeli-controlled territory in North Gaza, because remember, these guys are literally operating inside of Israeli-controlled territory in North Gaza, okay, claiming that they're actually, combating Hamas. They're real Palestinians combating Hamas or anything like that, or some shit like that, okay? Collaborating openly with Israel, getting arms from Israel, getting gear from Israel, and they're trying to create an environment of chaos. Okay, Gaza-based Al-Harris security platform, an officer in resistance security, revealed the arrest of a collaborator with the enemy who was gathering information during the handover ceremony of enemy captives in the current deal. So there are a bunch of different gangs. Compradors, capos, whatever you want to call them, collaborators that work with the Israeli government. The most famous one, obviously, is Yasser Abu Shabab, which we've talked about before on many instances, drug dealer and ISIS affiliate. But there are numerous different factions. There are also clan rivalries that Israel tries to foment and tries to beef up. One of the most notorious clan rivalries, from what I understand, from all of my conversations that I have with Palestinians that are literally in Gaza and Palestinians that have been able to escape the U.S. Israel funded Holocaust of Gaza, have told me that the number one clan that has always had some kind of like beef with Hamas is how do you say it? Dogmash. That's one of the major the tribe that has a major beef with Hamas that Israel has tried to actively use to their advantage. Okay. Hamas promises amnesty to any outlaws who turn themselves in, except murderers. Gaza Security Ministry opened the door for repentance for 1 week for any gang members, collaborators, aid looters, or robbers to surrender and receive amnesty for their offenses, as long as they didn't shed anybody's blood. Hamas's government had done similar campaigns multiple times in the past as a way of giving a second chance to Gaza who were being blackmailed or coerced by Israel to act as informants. Now, the real reason why they have to be more open-minded about this. Yeah, I think the clan originally might be Turkish. Yeah, Damush. That's they're like a Turkic Palestinian clan. So the reason why they have to be understanding and open-minded here is because if you know anything about the way that Israel forces people's hand into doing heinous shit, Palestinians, into collaborating with the state of Israel, because people ask like, why the fuck are these guys like joining forces with Israel? Some of these guys are assholes. Some of them are ambitious. They want power. They don't give a shit about killing their own countrymen, right? They don't care about Israel doing a genocide. But there are plenty of others, as Hamas and the entirety of the resistance knows, that are either desperate or are being blackmailed by Israel, or in some instances, Israel straight up threatens to kill their fucking entire family if they don't collaborate. This is the reason why they have this unheard of clemency, because in most circumstances, resistance forces, when they are going up against the colonial power, whether it be the IRA, whether it be the ANC, or even the FLN, they oftentimes will just straight up execute anyone who's a collaborator. No clemency, no fucking pardons whatsoever. But because this process has been so brutal, so ruthless, and so ongoing, and such a formative part of Israel, creating a network of collaborators that, while the execution of collaborators is not uncommon, the clemency that Hamas applies in this circumstance is. Okay? So understand that. And yes, the appropriate measure in this circumstance is to obviously properly adjudicate these issues and go through a normal process in a criminal justice system. Okay? Obviously, that's the normal process. But if you're a fucking adult or even remotely aware and not oblivious to the ways in which, the ways in which like resistance forces have historically operated, there's not much bandwidth there for them to design a court system instantly when all the fucking ministries are blown up. There's no courthouses. For the Palestinians right now, they're still in war. They're still under a genocidal apartheid forces occupation. They have to quickly restore order so that the recovery efforts can begin. Okay? Victimhood / oppressor fetishist? Are you saying I'm doing that? What, because I have sober analysis on how resistance forces have operated throughout history, given the limited confines that they have? That's why I said Donald Trump's comparison to like what he's doing in Venezuela is not an apt comparison. Even though he was defending Hamas's actions, it is not a fucking apt comparison at all, because America does have a proper investigative authority here before they decide to start lasering fucking boats off of the Venezuelan coastline, okay? Thousands of miles away. It's ridiculous. Traditionally, Israel will recruit as informants Gaza's most vulnerable, cancer patients, other critically ill and wounded Gaza's urgent need of medical treatment, widowed women, gay men, criminals, and fugitives. During the genocide, Israel used starvation as a weapon to coerce and blackmail Gazans into becoming rats for the IDF. Israel also threatened individuals to kill their families or themselves if they didn't collaborate. An amnesty campaign is an ideal way to avoid societal collapse or civil war. People turning themselves in would have to give detailed testimonies of what they did, other collaborators they work with, and the Israeli handlers. Then they are promised to walk free in return. Many of the most notorious IDF proxy gangs, e.g. Abu Shabaab, are currently based deep inside of the half of Gaza that is exclusively controlled by Israel and fully depopulated, making it a challenge for them to turn themselves in for authorities to apprehend them as long as Israel doesn't withdraw from those areas. Israel has been recently using those gangs to create chaos and brew a civil war inside of Gaza, a fake civil war. Okay? So while this is from our perspective an act of sheer barbarism, I understand, you know, when you're watching people get like executed in fucking broad daylight, and I know many people will hear me try to contextualize what is actually going on here and go, Hasan wants broad daylight executions. What a fucking monster he is. Oh, he's a classic Hamas dick rider. It's like, you have to understand the limitations that the resistance currently has, the resistance forces currently fucking have. And here is Palestinians themselves, the leader of Gaza's largest tribal assembly, on the executions. Justice was served. We stand heart and soul with Hamas. In a tense exchange on Saudi Arabia's Al Hadath, a channel hostile to the Palestinian resistance, Sheikh Husni al-Mughni, head of the Supreme Committee for Palestinian Tribal Affairs, defended Hamas's execution of men accused of collaborating with Israel and spreading disorder during the war. What is this? The problem, though, is that conditional clemency as a policy does not mean anything if there's no type of adjudication. If someone is caught or turns themselves in either as an innocent or a collaborator who was not a murderer, they have no means of establishing they're not a murderous collaborator. Before some kind of means of adjudication has begun established, the conditional part doesn't mean anything. Yeah, you just have to leave it up to the fucking Palestinians is the point. Like, there's not really anything we can do from over here beyond expecting them to have a normal criminal justice system. My point is, it's insane for us to sit there and be like, I can't believe it. I don't agree with public executions no matter what, Brodagy. I don't either. I don't even believe in capital punishment. What are we talking about? Okay, I don't. But if you want to understand what the situation looks like, there is no resource to undergo a normal criminal justice process, and time is of the essence. And in this circumstance, I can only look to other historic formations of resistance against, like militant resistance against colonial powers, and how those groups have chosen to deal with collaborators as swiftly as possible. That's why there is a heinous practice known as necklacing that came up in apartheid South Africa. Do you know what necklacing is? It's when the ANC would take collaborators that were working with the white Afrikaners to continue the apartheid regime. They would have tires placed around their necks, doused with gasoline, and then lit on fucking fire. Do you think I agree with that practice? No, of course not. That's fucking insane. Do they have a proper adjudication method to ensure that these guys were collaborators? No, they didn't. Okay. What do you think Kneecap's name comes from? The Irish rap trio. Where do you think the name Kneecap came from? It's a practice called kneecapping, where the IRA would go to collaborators, Irish collaborators, that were working with the British colonial occupation and would shoot them in the fucking kneecap. Children too, by the way. Not just adults. Literally children as well. Okay? That's where kneecap gets its name from. Yes. This is why I always stress the standard of violence is set forth by the colonial entity, the occupational power. Okay? Yeah, it's not fucking that's kind of whataboutism. No, it's not. It's not. You guys don't understand what words mean. I'm not even saying this is appropriate. Okay? I'm not saying it's appropriate. I'm just telling you what has happened. Please, analysis is not justification. Okay? If you find yourself being more considerate or being more understanding of the fucking confines or the limitations given to the Palestinian resistance at a moment where they're fucking literally just coming out of the tunnel structures after 2 years of fucking genocide. If you find yourself to consider this as justifiable, that's on you. Okay? I'm just explaining to you what has happened historically. Jesus Christ. Anyway, pressed about the absence of courts or due process, al-Mughni, who represents a key voice of Palestinian civil society, said Gaza security forces imposed field justice against gangs that killed, looted, and terrorized dozens of civilians. The accused were long known to the public, he said, adding that they had stolen aid convoys and were disowned by their families under tribal law. Abu Shabab is another great example of this. His own tribe has disowned him. Hamas warned these people several times through mediators and family members to surrender and face justice. Those who did were investigated. Those who resisted fought the police, leading to what happened, he explained. Rejecting al-Haddad's framing of lawlessness, al-Mughni replied, "There are no courts now, but when someone murders a 10-year-old child, deserves death or worse." He said that the tribe stood heart and soul with Hamas, calling the executed a deviant, corrupt faction created by Israel. Asked who holds Hamas accountable, al-Mughni said internal mechanisms exist to punish violations, but warned that leaving such justice to rival clans would mean civil war. He closed bluntly, "We are fully satisfied. These criminals violated every custom and every tradition while our people died under the rubble." For the record, if you want the full transcript, it also exists here. Okay, but that's the summarization. If you're wondering what took place and wondering how this happened, I'm here to explain it to you. Okay? Security service in Gaza publicly executed Israel's collaborators who were recruited to and used by the Israeli military to steal aid, attack starving aid seekers, destabilize internal front, monopolize goods, damage medical aid, blackmail people, kidnap resistance fighters. Yeah. People are asking for higher standards than y'all have for cops in the States. I know. You always have to. This is not like a fetishization of the oppressed population or giving them unlimited bandwidth to do whatever the fuck they want. This is just a broad recognition of the material conditions that Palestinians are subjected to, and within the limitations that they currently have, as they are trying to implement the recovery process, you still have people that are directly collaborating with Israel to foment civil war. Obviously, they have to be apprehended and detained. It's so fucking crazy. The audacity of Westerners whose greatest fucking adversity is when their Uber Eats delivery driver doesn't actually give them the right chicken nuggets that they purchase in the grocery store, talking about a bunch of people who just withstood a fucking genocide. This is not just a word, okay? Genocide is not a buzzword. How are you any different than the people who come in here and go, "Oh, there's a genocide going on. Why are you playing a fucking video game?" Like, how are you any different than those people if you have this kind of approach? Yes, Donda is the album of the decade says, "Imagine you're undergoing a genocide and Westerners are telling you how to deal with traitors. This is not something new or complex." Exactly. Yes. And I think a lot of people don't understand that there is like an interior security apparatus that has remained throughout this fucking genocide regardless. There are special forces within the Palestinian groups, Palestinian resistance factions. One of them was the forces that were tasked with protecting the hostages, protecting the prisoners of war, shadow groups, right? They were the Arrow unit that specifically moved through crowds and actually successfully were able to transfer hostages from point A to point B without Israel figuring it out, even though they had 24/7 drone coverage over the entire Palestinian affairs as they carried out their genocide. Like, they were still capable of operating under a brutal blockade, hermetically sealed by the oppressive, nuclear-armed apartheid forces. Anyway, Israel hasn't stopped its firing in this ceasefire, by the way. That's the other side of the story. We're obviously going to be talking about that. Israeli Air Force aircraft killed 2 Palestinians in Gaza this morning who approached clan opposing Hamas in the Shajaya area. Israel is allowing one of the clans that oppose Hamas to remain in the Israeli-controlled area beyond the yellow line for fear of retribution. Palestinian resistance factions. Our message to all criminals and criminal gangs fueled by the Zionist entity and its intelligence apparatus is that there's no place for agents, killers, criminals, or bandits. They will be held accountable. We extend our salute and pride to the members of the Palestinian Security Institution and the Ministry of Interior for their tremendous efforts and valued sacrifices, which are a source of pride for every Palestinian and free patriot. The Al-Qassam Brigades claims this operation deep inside of Rafah from September. Our fighters confirmed the detonation of a pre-planned minefield on a number of military vehicles of the Hummer type, causing enemy soldiers to be killed and wounded. This was when 3 more were injured, including one who was in serious condition. The IDF was investigating a suspicion that a Hamas sniper fired at them before detonating the explosive device during a routine operation on the Philadelphia highway. Our fighters also fired sniper rifles at a number of injured soldiers at the site near Deir Yassin School at the Al Janina neighborhood east of Rafah City, southern Gaza Strip. Families of the prisoners, the autopsy showed one of the bodies of a soldier who was killed after being captured in Gaza due to an airstrike by the Israeli Air Force. Israeli media claims that this decision has been reversed and 600 aid trucks are supposed to enter today. By the way, Israel informed the UN that 300 aid trucks will be allowed to enter the Gaza Strip starting tomorrow, and fuel and gas would not be allowed. Israeli media claims the decision has now been reversed as of 9 hours ago, where 600 aid trucks are supposed to enter today, even though there's no evidence for it thus far, and that the Gaza Center for Human Rights has recorded 36 violations of the ceasefire, resulting in the martyrdom of 7 Palestinians, and only 137 trucks have entered Gaza so far. Some of the martyred prisoners returned by Israel show signs of field executions. They were blindfolded, they had bound arms, and Israel only had numbers on their bodies. Israel also then claims one of the deceased that was handed over doesn't belong to the Israeli prisoner. It doesn't belong to an Israeli prisoner, as we talked about earlier. The Al-Qassam brigades confirmed that the body belongs to a soldier that was captured back in May 2024 during a resistance ambush in Jabalia. They published a video of this capture at the time. Following Trump's expression of support for the stabilization efforts, CENTCOM issued a statement demanding that Hamas cease the acts of violence both in its own areas and in areas secured by Israel, or in other words, they demanded the crackdown on collaborators and bandits end. Yeah, speaking of which, Israel didn't even bother to remove the evidence of executions, for the record, when they released some of the slain Palestinians. What's extraordinary about the story is that Israelis didn't even bother to remove the evidence of execution, bound hands, blindfolds, before handing the bodies back. Some of the bodies were crushed by tanks. Okay? Some of the bodies that Israel released were crushed by tanks. Some of them had been clearly executed with their hands bound. Yeah, this happened yesterday. Israeli occupation authorities transferred the bodies of 45 Palestinians to the International Committee of the Red Cross. This is impunity. This is how you operate when you do not care about anything, when you know that no one will do anything to you, okay? Where you just straight up give an international authority, a third party, evidence of your field executions that are completely illegal, like where you've executed prisoners of war. Some of which weren't armed combatants at all, as a matter of fact. Many of which were just straight up hostages. Anyway, so footage of Al-Qassam Shadow Unit transferring 2 more deceased prisoners to the Red Cross moments ago. This happened an hour ago. Quds citing Channel 15, the Al-Qassam brigades contacted the families of the Israeli prisoners on the day of their release through Israeli SIM cards, which are the video calls that everyone later saw. The SIM cards were placed by the army in locations out of Gaza to gather intelligence about the Israeli prisoners, but several of these SIM cards were activated just a few hours before the prisoner handover operation, and the families of the prisoners received phone calls from them. Pictures of the Qassam unit, not everyone's wearing the Shadow Unit patches, but I did see one of them. That's the Shadow Unit patch. I think there might be even a close-up as well. Anytime you see militants this up close, wearing their, obviously still hiding their faces, but like wearing what seems to look like combat gear, which they put on for ceremonial instances in most circumstances, you recognize that these are literally fucking like barely teenagers, okay? The Israeli captives have reported back to the Mossad that many of the people that were holding them fucking captive were lecturers, were teachers, were professors, were people that worked normal day-to-day shit. Okay? Now, obviously, if you're pro-Israel and you hear that and you go, the entire Palestinian society is Hamas. And to me, when I hear that, I think, yeah, no shit. What do you think is going to happen when people are forced to call to arms to defend themselves? Of course, these people don't want to fucking fight. These people don't want to take up arms. Do you think people want to run up to tanks in their fucking flip-flops and dump IEDs that they made from unexploded Israeli ordnance? No, they don't want to do that. They want to be cooks. They want to be teachers. They want to live their fucking regular lives. These are people who have been forced into this position. These are all the orphaned sons, okay? These are all the people that are taking up arms as an act of final desperation, who choose to die on their feet rather than die begging on their knees. I always think about that one guy who was like, I want to run and operate a gym. Like I think he was like one of those dudes from the West Bank, actually. He was one of the Tulkarm. I think he was in the Tulkarm brigades or something. I forget. But like, there was that one guy I think about all the time that was interviewed where he was like, I want to own and operate a gym. But like, this is what I have to do. This is to protect my loved ones. Fidel Castro, 1967. Revolutionaries didn't choose armed struggle as the best path. It's the people. And so the people only have two choices, to suffer or to fight. If you're going to get shot and killed, some people make the decision to at least hold a weapon in the process. Okay? Yeah, here, this is what I was talking about. Freed hostage Nimrod Cohen said food in captivity ran low when aid to Gaza was blocked, father says. Testimony of the hostages undermines two Hosbert talking points, that there was no shortage of food in Gaza, that Hamas intentionally starved the hostages, but they won't care. They'll keep lying. But also the other testimony. Oh, this is the older. Oh yeah, he was a Jenin. He was a member of the Jenin brigades, this guy.
Refugee camp to speak to a member of the Jenin brigades. Resistance fighters like him were the main target of Israel's recent military assault on Jenin, its biggest in the occupied West Bank for 20 years.
This guy, for the record, this is the video I was talking about. This dude, for the record, is literally engaging in, once again, no holds barred, 1,000,000% totally legal and totally moral resistance against the illegal Israeli occupation in land that the international community recognizes belongs to Palestine and Palestinians. This is a person who is in the West Bank. This is not even Gaza, okay? This is a person who is in the West Bank, in his own internationally recognized territory, standing firmly and committed against the illegal and unjustifiable Israeli occupation, okay? Every single step that the Israeli occupational forces take in the West Bank is illegal. Every single step that he takes is perfectly moral, perfectly just, and perfectly legal. Okay?
هو فشلهم انهم بدهم يعملوا اقتحام واسع ويعتقلوا اكبر عدد من المطاردين ويتم قتل اللي راح يواجههم اللي هو اكبر عدد برضه من المطاردين. هذا الشيء فشلوا ب 100%.
He says he used to be a gym trainer, but life under Israeli occupation made him change course.
اكثر شغله اثرت فيي اللي هو استشهاد صاحبي. من ناسي تاريخ استشهاده بجزء 2013 استشهد. اثر فيي كثير يعني. احنا اللي عايشين مع اسرائيل واحنا بنقدر نقدر شو اسرائيل شو بدها. اسرائيل بدها كل فلسطين وبدها تقتل الشعب الفلسطيني وتشرده وبدها ايانا نبقى عبيد عندها. احنا نقاوم الاحتلال. مستحيل اسرائيل تعمل لنا حل ثاني غير المقاومه، انه حل سياسي او انه في هدنه او سلام. مستحيل. هسه لو تجيبي كل السلام اللي بالعالم تحطيه بدولة اسرائيل راح تلاقيهم ثاني يوم بيعملوا مستوطنات، ثاني يوم بقتلوا، ثاني يوم بيأسروا، يعني بيأسروا نسوان وبنات صغار وشباب صغار اشبال. ما احنا بنطلب من الشعب كله يكون ضد.
He says his dream is to see Palestine free so he can lead a regular life.
أعيش حياتي الطبيعية وبطش وبروح على البحر.
I would live my life. I would live my normal life and go out to enjoy myself. I would go to the beach. And I would do everything I wanted, whatever I desired. Palestine's nature is stunning, and I'm someone that loves to go out and see nature. So I'd go climb mountains and go to the beach. It's so crazy how this dynamic is not seen in the Western world. There is so much, there's so much dehumanization that has taken root in American and Western consciousness, where we just look at these people and we think, yeah, these are dangerous, scary individuals. We never understand what the logical through line is as to why they engage in acts of resistance against Israeli occupation. Like, we don't consider them human beings. We don't consider them to have dreams. We don't consider them to want freedom, to want the most understandable need that every human being has, which is emancipation, sovereignty. They don't want to fucking go and fight, dude. They don't want to live inside of tunnels and shit. You think they want this? No, of course not. Channel 12 and Ravid, this shit is so exhausting and infuriating. In case you missed it, Hamas announced after the latest transfer that they will need time and special engineering equipment to find all the other bodies. More from Ravid, a senior American official. The U.S. wants to begin rebuilding the city of Rafah, which is not under Hamas control, and turn it into a model area that shows how the Strip can be without Hamas control, which is also where the Abu Shabab compound and passage is. Meanwhile, once again, Israel is still limiting the number of aid trucks allowed to enter Gaza. It's only permitting 300, half of the agreed number under the Trump plan. So Israel is back to its old ways, still putting the Palestinians on a diet, as they like to call it. The UN relief chief has said Israel must immediately open all the Gaza crossings. Tom Fletcher, the UN's Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, said in an interview with AFP that Israel should immediately open all crossings to allow aid into Gaza. We want this to happen now within the framework of a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. He is scheduled to visit the Rafah crossing on Thursday from the Egyptian side, the vital entry point that has remained closed for several months. Phantom Ambassador says the situation on the ground is complex. Israel knows that locating the bodies will take time. It is not something solved under pressure or in a few days. It requires time and equipment. The mediators have been informed and are convinced of that, and even the enemy knows the delay is not intentional. As I said, what benefit would we gain from hiding the remains of the dead? None whatsoever. Yeah, it's all fucking bad faith. It's all bad faith. This is the senior PIJ official that the chatter was relaying what he said. Senior Palestinian Islamic Jihad official Dr. Mohammed Al-Hindi, Deputy Secretary General of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad Movement, said, the resistance has requested assistance because the war was devastating. Israel dropped enormous bombs that flattened entire buildings. Some of the people who served as points of contact with the captives were themselves killed. The situation on the ground is complex. Israel knows that locating the bodies will take time. It is not something solved under pressure or in a few days. It requires time and equipment. The mediators have been informed and are convinced of that. And even the enemy knows the delay is not intentional. As I said, what benefit would we gain from hiding the remains of the dead? None whatsoever. Okay? And from what I understand, there are Turkish recovery teams that are being deployed into Gaza right now as well, in aiding in the process of discovery and extraction. So they're working around the clock to get these guys out, to get the captives out, the remains of the captives out, and help the Palestinian population find their loved ones under the rubble.
Palestinians believed to be armed gangs. What's going on there?
Hamas is killing them because they can. Israel has empowered with weapons and money gangs of Palestinians who were involved in mostly illegal activities in the past, and they've empowered them as an alternative to Hamas.
President Trump had this to say.
You know, they did take out a couple of gangs that were very bad, very, very bad gangs, and that didn't bother me much, to be honest with you.
The Palestinian Authority has condemned the Hamas executions as extrajudicial killings. President Trump also said yesterday...
Yeah, fucking a boss. Maybe he should go in there. Maybe he should go to Gaza at his wonderful age of like 87 and help with the relief efforts, you know, if he's going to be ruling and overseeing the Gaza Strip. It's so crazy to me that one of the main belligerents here is the United States of America, and the American president is outflanking Mahmoud fucking Abbas, bro. That is crazy. I guess it's not that crazy when you think about it, because, you know, as I've said over and over again, Abbas is like, his approval is less than 7% in the eyes of the Palestinians. Now you know why, okay? Palestinians always fucking say over and over again that the PA and the Fatah party is seen as lower than fucking dirt. Your Hassanite brother had a pretty dumb take about this. Who's my Hassanite brother? Oh, you mean Mehdi Hasan? Yeah, I don't care about what Mehdi Hasan is saying, okay?
That Hamas must disarm and warn the group, and I quote, we will disarm them and it'll happen perhaps quickly or perhaps violently. Tony?
Deborah Pata.
Guy Illouz was a sound technician for some of the biggest bands in Israel. Today, the sound check for his funeral procession.
You should be friends with Mehdi Hasan. You both have the same name. I am friends with Mehdi Hasan. And not because we have this. Okay? I don't, but I still sometimes have disagreements with Mehdi Hasan. It's okay. And it's normal and it's fine. Who cares?
Hi.
The 26-year-old was shot by Hamas fighters at the Nova Festival, brought into Gaza critically wounded, held in Al-Shifa hospital and died soon afterwards. On Monday, 2 years later, his body was released. No sound checks required in his hometown for this stereo sentiment.
Why she have to die so young? So I can't understand this.
Last night, the bodies of 4 people were released by Hamas and brought to the forensic center in Tel Aviv. But one of the bodies was not that of a hostage.
3 deceased captives have been identified at the National Center of Forensic Medicine. Staff Sergeant Tamir Nimrodi, Uriel Baruch, and Eitan Levy, may they rest in peace. They joined 4 deceased captives who were identified yesterday here: Guy Luz, Bifin Joshi, Yossi Sharabi, and Captain Daniel Peretz. May they rest in peace. The remains of the 4th body that arrived yesterday from Gaza Strip is not associated with one of the deceased captives.
The future of the ceasefire and the fate of thousands of people could now depend on the scientific work being done in this center. During a previous exchange, Hamas handed over a body they said was that of a hostage, which turned out to be that of a Palestinian in Gaza. Now, if that sort of thing starts to happen this time round, it could actually derail the entire process. Last time round, the correct remains were handed over to Israel eventually. And in the last hour, Hamas has said they will hand over 2 hostages' bodies tonight. The text of the current ceasefire deal acknowledges that the location and identification of bodies will be difficult, but given the levels of distrust here, everything becomes more fragile.
Hamas, the terror organization, is required to uphold its commitments to the mediators and return all of our hostages as part of the implementation of this agreement. We will not compromise on this.
In Gaza, the bodies of dozens of Palestinians were returned by the Red Cross, released by Israel. Work to identify the deceased is ongoing. The setting, what's left of Gaza's health system. This afternoon, the funeral procession of Guy Luz made its way along the highway to Tel Aviv, guards of honor on the overpasses, and finally to the Ra'anana cemetery. His father Michel arrived, surrounded by the embrace of a community who'd been waiting for this funeral for a long time. During the eulogy, he addressed the condition his son was returned to him in and spoke to Guy directly.
את היופי שלך, גם במצב שבו חזרת אלינו. אוהב אותך גלייטות שלי, בני בחורי אהובי. תנוח על משכבך בשלום.
The end was a dignified affair for Guy Luz and his family. Something so many others during this war can only dream of.
Now, Israel has now handed over the bodies of 90 Palestinians to Gaza's health ministry. Its forensics team says some of the bodies were still shackled and they bore signs of torture, like many of the Palestinians who were freed on Monday. The UN says the Israeli military continues to kill civilians around the lines its troops withdrew to. Harry Fawcett has this report, which contains some graphic images of injury.
Gaza's people have suffered through 2 years of Israeli bombardment, but since it stopped, there are other stories of suffering now being told by those who were taken from Gaza and held in Israeli custody. In December last year, an Israeli ground incursion targeted the Kamal Adwan hospital in the far north, calling it a Hamas stronghold, detaining its medical director, Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, and more than 200 others. Among them, 28-year-old Mahmoud Abu Ful, who came home to Gaza as part of the mass release on Monday. Home, now a tent, with a mother and brother he'd longed to see again, but now cannot. He lost a leg in an Israeli strike in 2015. He says his lack of mobility meant he wasn't able to leave the hospital, where he'd been seeking refuge when it was stormed.
After my arrest, they transferred us inside the Israeli territories to detention centres, where I was interrogated. I was beaten and tortured, and as a result of this, I lost my eyesight. The blows were mainly on my forehead and the back of my head.
It happened, he says, at the notorious Sde Teman detention center. He says after one beating, he was left unconscious for 2 hours.
When I woke up, I couldn't see well, and soon after that, I completely lost my vision. The treatment was extremely bad and harsh. There was no medical care at all. They only gave me eye drops and ointment.
We put his accusations to the Israeli military. It has not responded. Like Israelis, Palestinians in Gaza are welcoming back the dead as well as the living. Israel returned 45 more bodies to Gaza today via the Red Cross. Our sources in Gaza suggest some of them were Hamas fighters killed inside Gaza at the beginning of the war. Others were blindfolded and handcuffed. Others bore marks suggesting they'd been run over by tanks.
The occupation forces had placed some of the bodies in refrigerators. Some of them are clearly identifiable, while others are difficult to recognise. We are waiting for the Red Cross to give us the names of these 45 martyrs.
And there were 2 more Palestinians killed today. The Israeli Air Force reportedly carrying out an airstrike in eastern Gaza City, in what Israel defines as a prohibited area near its military positions. Hamas is also killing Palestinians.
Yeah, the bodies that Israel returned were bound and executed while bound, for the record. As in, they lined them up and they had handcuffed them or zip-tied them and then shot them in the head.
Palestinians engaging in gun battles with armed gangs, executing those it calls Israeli collaborators.
I don't know if they show this.
President Trump says he's okay with that for now, but insists they will, after a period, disarm or be disarmed. For now, Hamas is in charge in the territory Israel has withdrawn from, promising to hand over more, while emphasizing the difficulty of locating remains in the ruins. Next to the ruins, there are some signs of recovery, markets being replenished, bakeries reopening, but deprivation is everywhere.
There are no homes at all, there's no shelter, nothing. We wake up in the morning and look for a sip of water to drink. If we want to eat, there's no money and no work to do. This isn't a lie.
Yeah. Look upon the victims of Israel's barbarism. Okay? Our attitude is so broken. The way we approach the subject matter in the Western world is so broken. We look at this guy because he doesn't speak the language and the color of his skin is brown. So we look at this guy and we think, even those who are pro-Palestine or say that they're pro-Palestine, look at a person like this and deep down inside still think like, okay, maybe he kind of deserves it. We do not have the same attitude towards Israel's barbarism. The people that did all of this, are the real barbarians, not the people who are on the receiving end. Okay? Turks killing Armenians is fine. There has never been a moment where I've said that that is appropriate at all, you fucking moron. This is what I mean. You're just on maximum cope. This is like you have nothing. You have nothing. You understand that you have nothing. You have no leg to stand on. So you have to just turn around and be like, well, now that's whataboutism, by the way, for the record. If you guys want to know what whataboutism is, it's not when you actually compare this current contemporary resistance movement and its actions against collaborators to previous historical resistance movements and their actions against collaborators. Whataboutism is when I'm talking about Israel's genocidal actions and its impact, and someone turns around and goes, what about the Armenian genocide? Which I don't even I don't even say is fake or anything like that. The implication is that I deny it, right? Because I'm Turkish when I don't. That is whataboutism.
The UN says more still than the 600 trucks a day being promised are now needed. Israel now reported to be preparing to reopen the Rafah crossing from Egypt to Gaza to both trucks and Palestinian citizens tomorrow.
Well, joining me now is Arab Barghouti. His father is the Palestinian political leader Marwan Barghouti, who is currently still serving 5 life sentences in an Israeli...
Yeah. Also, we got new information on Marwan's conditions. It seems that he was actually tortured Marwan Barghouti was assaulted in Israeli custody. Palestinian prisoners' media office said senior Fatah leader Marwan Barghouti lost consciousness and suffered 4 broken ribs after being beaten by Israeli guards during his transfer from Rimon to Megiddo prison in mid-September. The office accused a special Israeli suppression unit of carrying out the assault. Barghouti, imprisoned since 2002 and serving multiple life sentences, was excluded from the October 2025 Gaza prisoner exchange despite repeated resistance demands for his release. On Israel's fear of his release, Marwan Barghouti, imprisoned since 2002, has long been regarded as the most popular Palestinian leader after Yasser Arafat and a rare unifying figure across factions. His influence has made him a central demand in every major prisoner exchange and a red line for Israel, which has repeatedly refused to free him. In August, Israel's far-right minister Itamar Ben-Gvir stormed Barghouti's cell, threatening him directly on camera. That fat fuck. Rights groups have said his repeated beatings, isolation, and public humiliation reflect Israel's fear of his political stature and the growing unity his name inspires among Palestinians. This is Marwan's son, Arab Barghouti.
The jail, he is described by his supporters as being the only leader who could win an election outright amongst Palestinians. Thank you for joining us. At one point, it was thought that your father would be released. Can you tell me what happened?
I think what happened that the Israeli government has made it very clear with a clear statement and an announcement that they don't want a political solution. They just want the cycle of violence to continue on this land. I think that everyone understands that my father represents a political solution. He's someone who has been a supporter for a political solution, a two-state solution for decades now. We've talked about this a few weeks ago. And this is exactly what the Israeli government doesn't want. Since he's been in prison, more than 800 Palestinians have been released with life sentences, with more, as you know, according to them, more security complicated cases. But with my father, they refused to release him because he has a political vision that is, first of all, accepted by the Palestinian people, trusted by the Palestinian people, but more importantly, accepted by the international community. They don't want the dream.
I did ask David Mensa, the Israeli government spokesman, about your father's case a few days ago, and he said Marwan Barghouti is no Nelson Mandela. You know, he is a multiple convicted criminal.
The irony, of course, is that Marwan Barghouti, first of all, Marwan Barghouti is Nelson Mandela in that same vein, because Nelson Mandela was also apprehended and arrested for the exact same fucking purpose, for the exact same reasons. And as far as I understand, like, I mean, Jeremy Scahill said that Barghouti had led resistance efforts, but from what I understand, I don't think he actually engaged in any sort of direct armed conflict.
I mean, a government that has faces like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and Netanyahu, I don't think that they're eligible or qualified to come and, to evaluate people. My father has been called the Palestinian Mandela for the struggle that he's struggled for the Palestinian people. And as I said, he has a very clear political vision. It's not like...
And yes, Mandela's conditions in prison were better than Barghouti's. That is for sure. The hit is in for Marwan Barghouti. Freed prisoner Mahmoud al-Arada told El Arabi TV that Marwan Barghouti, the veteran Fatah leader, widely seen as a singular unifying political figure, is the #1 targeted prisoner in the system. He said that from the moment the war began, a war began against Marwan and against his family. Ben-Gvir, he added, personally entered Barghouti's cell and told him, "You will go out in a wheelchair. We will execute you." After 8 months in solitary confinement at Rimon, Barghouti was transferred to the Megiddo prison, which El Arada described as a real slaughterhouse where major crimes are taking place. He said the hit is there for Barghouti. Earlier today, the Palestinian prisoners' media office reported Barghouti lost consciousness and suffered 4 broken ribs after being brutalized by Israeli guards during his transfer from Rimon to Megiddo prison mid-September. Fucking animals, dude. Straight up. Anyway, meanwhile, as far as like the Hamas end of the bargain on the ceasefire, according to the Trump administration, 2 advisors of President Trump told reporters they don't think Hamas has violated the agreement yet regarding the bodies of the hostages. They said there is no heavy equipment in Gaza that is needed for such an effort. It's almost impossible for Hamas to reach all the dead hostages, one of the advisors said. So, once again, in the strangest circumstances, It is actually the Trump administration that is holding on to the continuation of the ceasefire. It gives me a little bit of confidence. It gives me a little bit of confidence that like it is currently the Trump administration that is maintaining this line, shockingly enough, instead of giving Israel the opportunity to claim that they're actually violating the ceasefire so they can go back and do whatever the fuck they want. Now, having said that, will this hold? I do not know. Okay? I do not think that this will hold. I worry that Donald Trump will allow Israel to violate the ceasefire in such spectacular fashion that they... Oh, 1 second. Yeah, I got my food. What made you less optimistic over the last couple of days? The breaches from Israel? Yes. Also, I just don't trust Israel. I haven't been optimistic about this at all. I've never been really all that optimistic about this process because, like I said, I do not trust Israel.
We're going to begin with a fragile ceasefire in Gaza that is holding for now.
Like when they say fragile ceasefire, it's really interesting because like they don't actually say it's a fragile ceasefire because of Israel, even though that is the reason why it's fragile. Like this is not a fragile ceasefire because of Hamas or anything. This is a fragile ceasefire because of Israel and Israel alone.
In spite of new challenges, Israel claims this morning that one of the 4 bodies that Hamas handed over yesterday is actually not a hostage. Hamas has sent gunmen into the streets of Gaza, and there are images showing executions of people that the group calls collaborators and outlaws. Well, President Trump gave Hamas a stark warning yesterday. In his words, he says, if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. We'll have more on that in just a minute. But first, we're going to go to Tony. He's still in Tel Aviv, where he got an exclusive interview with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, Tony, I know you were due to fly back yesterday, but I say getting an exclusive with Mr. Netanyahu is worth sticking around for one more day. Good morning to you.
Yeah, this was big, Gail, so we did stick around, and we met up with the Prime Minister at Rabin Medical Center just after sunset. That's just outside of Tel Aviv here. And we watched as he and the First Lady visited with the newly reunited hostages and their families there. But we also looked ahead beyond Israel's borders.
Our exclusive with Mr. Hitler. Very, very fun times, you know? I bet Double Cirque Tony fucking loves that opportunity. He's like, my goat, Mr. Adolf. You are so incredible.
On this current ceasefire to Palestinians' future.
Who is going to govern Gaza? The only names mentioned are Donald Trump and Tony Blair. Is Tony Blair going to be the president of Gaza?
I doubt it, but I think that this is a transitional period, and we want to fashion, a governance that works, that is not made of people who are committed to our destruction. Because if we put them there, then we'll just repeat it again and again and again. And we don't want to have the October 7th massacre repeated.
How do you de-radicalize the population in Gaza that wants to fight? You've got thousands of young men who have just spent 2 years enduring brutal war or fighting in this brutal war. And on the back of that,
how do you de-radicalize Gaza is such an arrogant display of Western chauvinism, but expected from the now Barry Weiss-controlled pro-Israel dish rag that is CBS News, which, of course, Tony DeKoppel was already a pro-Israel actor from the start, if you remember. It's just so unacceptable. How do we de-radicalize the victims of a genocide and not the genocidaires? Incredible. What do you expect from the likes of Double Cirque Tony?
Generations of struggle.
I think that you have to understand that Gaza is not uniform. There are Gazans who are fighting Hamas and are saying, we don't want this anymore. And a lot of people in Gaza now know that Hamas has brought catastrophic consequences to them because of its fanaticism. The most important thing in destroying fanaticism is to destroy a certain hope, the hope that the fanaticism will achieve its results. When people know Israel is here to stay, you're not going to destroy the Jewish state.
One thing we didn't touch on is the latest apparent disruption in aid into Gaza, because that bit of news came to us after our conversation. But we talked about a lot, and we're going to have more of it at the 7:30 half hour, including what it was like working with President Trump and also what comes next in this fragile ceasefire.
We have more now of Tony's wide-ranging, exclusive conversation with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So they spoke at a hospital just outside Tel Aviv, where the Prime Minister and his wife met newly returned hostages and their families. Tony joins us once again from Tel Aviv. Tony?
Good morning, Gail.
It's pretty crazy that this motherfucker, this evil motherfucker literally just said, yes, we want to kill the hope of Palestinian self-determination straight up. Like, he just said it. It's not like, it's not a read between the lines situation. He just straight up said, we must kill the hope of the Palestinians in terms of self-determination. And we still wonder who the evil party is here.
In a blunt moment, we asked the Prime Minister point blank what it would take for him to consider Israel's many conflicts to be over. And he responded in part, quote, the way to purchase peace is through strength. And it was military strength, at least as much as diplomacy, that he believes allowed Israel to win back the hostages that we met face to face just last night.
Everybody in Israel since the last time I was here seems so relieved. Do you feel relieved?
I feel both relieved and very moved.
We watched late Tuesday as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his wife Sarah moved room to room, visiting 5 returned hostages and their families on their first full day back together. Each described an ordeal of long hours underground, limited sunlight, and scarce food. Avi Natan Or, for example, the partner of another hostage, Noah Argamani, lost at least 60 pounds in Hamas captivity.
I'm learning that they didn't lose hope, that they believe that one way or the other will get them out.
Now it's a question of whether this moment of hope for Israel and the region can last.
Mr. Trump says the war is over, but clearly the war is not over. The IDF is deployed to sections of Gaza still, and Hamas is still on the streets of Gaza. How can you say the war is over?
Well, we agreed to give peace a chance. The conditions in his 20-point plan are very clear. It's not only that we get the hostages out without getting our military out, but that we would subsequently have both demilitarization and disarmament. They're not the same thing. First, Hamas has to give up its arms. And second, you want to make sure that there are no weapons factories inside Gaza. There's no smuggling of weapons into Gaza. We also agreed, okay, let's get the first part done. And now let's give a chance to do the second part peacefully, which is my hope.
You just mentioned how closely you're working with Donald Trump on this. He took some digs at you, as he often does with people, during his speech at the Knesset.
He's not the easiest guy to deal with, but that's what makes him great.
Why does he say you're so hard to work with?
Well, I hope he says that because I'm very tough on the matters that pertain to my country's future. It is always the responsibility of the leader of the Jewish state to make sure that the Jewish state is never imperiled with its very existence. That's why I did the things I did.
There was a poll that came out recently in America finding that just 14% of Americans under 30 say their sympathies lie with Israel and with the Israeli people. You are losing young people across the political spectrum in America and across the world. Is there a fix for that?
I think so. I think the first fix is to finish the war as speedily as possible, something that I have sought to do against all these contrarian propaganda. Of course I want to end the war. Who wants it to continue? I've been to war myself. I've been in battles. My brother died leading the historic rescue at Entebbe for the release of hostages.
I'm aware.
You have to be crazy to want wars to prolong. So
yeah, you just got to buy TikTok. You got to buy TikTok and wage war on information.
So
first you want to
end it. You want to end the war speedily, because in the TikTok age and in the television age, letting wars go on too long is going to cost you precisely what it costs you. There's a real battle on the social media. It's a big battle. Not simple.
It is.
So it's a battle for truth.
A battle of messaging, of ideas. And there's a big idea that the world talks about and that America talks about, the two-state solution, something that you used to talk about, but not anymore. How come?
When I talked about it, it wasn't the proposition that people give. They assume, okay, there are two sovereign states, and a sovereign state has, for example, military power, it can make covenants. The Palestinians should have all the powers in a peaceful day to govern themselves. but they can't have the powers to threaten our survival. That sovereign power of security must remain with Israel. Because otherwise, the jihadists take over. Iran takes over immediately. And that's what happened every time we vacated territory. The most extreme fanatics came in. And people said to me, but that's not...
Do you still believe saying that Israel's most popular day today is, and so on? Yes. Yes. I do not believe that they will be able to recover their approval rating. They will try. But I think given the ways in which they will try through media manipulation and whatnot, it will only invoke more of an aggressive response towards those initiatives. They're far too arrogant and far too fascistic.
You know, that's not a perfect state. And I said, you're right. But it's perfectly aligned with reality.
So is that a reality you can imagine existing?
Well, it's a reality that if you had Palestinian governance that stopped teaching their kids to destroy the state of Israel, obviously if you have that and they educate them for peace, then I think you can have a different reality. But even under that reality, this could take generations. Israel has to be in control of the military power to prevent our destruction.
And I'll add just one more thing, guys, as I toss it back to you in New York. Just before we started rolling on that interview, I mentioned to the Prime Minister that his obituary, after the success of the last few days, will look very different today than it would have looked like 2 years ago. And he said in part, it's not his obituary that he's concerned about, it's his country's, which underscores once again, for Netanyahu, many of Israel's problems feel existential. And then as we think about what's coming next in the ceasefire and for the future of the whole region, I think that's a real insight into his mindset as he looks out onto the world.
Tony, well done. I know that new information is coming.
Brother, you're an American citizen. I understand the zealotry of a convert, which Tony is. That's why we call him Tony Double Circ, because he got an adult circumcision after converting to Judaism. But god damn, dude, get his dick out of your fucking mouth. It's just like, is this his attempt to try to rekindle his former relationship with his previous Israeli wife? Is that what happened? For those of you who don't know, Tony had a Israeli wife. Only reason why we know all this, by the way, is because he volunteered this information, for the record. He married an Israeli woman, had kids with an Israeli woman, and in the process of that marriage, he literally went and converted to Judaism and got a second circumcision, an adult circumcision, and his wife still divorced him and took the kids to Israel, from what I understand. He's now married to someone else after all that work, man.
Now, minute by minute, but